All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving into some fascinating stuff, some news about what Donald Trump's been saying lately
Ah,
about U.S. foreign policy. And let me tell you, it's a wild ride.
it is a little out there.
It is. He's thinking big. We're talking territorial expansion, renaming landmarks you know and love, maybe even some international incidents. Who knows? So get ready to explore Trump's, let's call it expansionist vision.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that these ideas are a real departure from the way, U.S. foreign policy's been going lately. We're talking about expanding U.S. territory,
Right.
which is something that really hasn't been on the table for decades.
I know, right? Like, it's such a throwback. Trump's talking about acquiring Greenland. He wants to get back control of the Panama Canal. I mean, when was the last time the U.S. really seriously thought about expanding its borders like this? It's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could argue that the last time was Alaska,
Yeah.
way back in 1867. I mean, yeah, of course there were smaller acquisitions and, overseas territories throughout history, but nothing on the scale
Right.
that Trump is talking about.
No, I know. And he's not exactly being subtle about it either. Like, he's talking about using military force or economic pressure. It's not exactly diplomatic approach, is it?
No, it's definitely not the usual song and dance of diplomacy, and that's kind of what makes this so fascinating and
Yeah.
potentially volatile. Just imagine, the global reaction if the U.S. really threatened military action to, say, take Greenland.
Oh, yeah.
The ripples would be huge.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into this Greenland thing a little bit. I mean, Trump has not been quiet about his interest in it.
No, not at all. He's even said, like, Denmark should just give it up or face tariffs.
Oh, wow.
He's floated the idea of, like, Greenlanders voting on independence or becoming part of the U.S., And he keeps talking about, like, protecting the free world. It's kind of a strange connection to make.
Yeah, it is. It does make you wonder what he's really after. What do you think it is? Is it just strategic, advantage, or is there something more to it?
Well, Greenland does have strategic and economic value, that's for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
It's got resources like rare earth minerals, and its location is really key for Arctic shipping routes and, potential military
Used to
bases.
see that.
Yeah. So controlling Greenland could be a major power play
Oh, total.
in a region that's becoming more and more important.
Especially as, like, the Arctic opens up because of climate change.
Exactly. And this isn't even a new idea for the U.S.
What do you mean?
Back in the 1940s, the U.S. actually tried to buy Greenland from Denmark.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, so there's some precedent here.
Wow, that's wild. So, okay, we've got this history
Yeah.
of U.S. interest in Greenland. But to understand what might be driving Trump's renewed interest, maybe we need to look at, like, what makes Greenland so strategically valuable today, especially today.
Right. I think a key factor is climate change. As the Arctic ice melts, new shipping routes are opening up, and access to resources like oil and gas is
Mm.
getting easier. And Greenland is right in the middle of all this, which makes it a pretty attractive piece of real estate.
So it's not just about what's on Greenland, but also about controlling those sea lanes and potential resources in the whole Arctic region.
Exactly. And then there's the military angle. Greenland's location is really important for, like, keeping an eye on what Russia's doing in the Arctic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it could also host, U.S. military bases.
Yeah, so for someone like Trump, who's very focused on projecting American power, I can see how Greenland would look pretty tempting, especially with all the tension with Russia.
Oh, absolutely. It plays into this whole America First idea
Yeah.
and regaining global dominance. It also kind of taps into this historical narrative of American expansionism
Yeah.
and frontier spirit, which has always been a powerful force in U.S. politics.
That's a really good point. Speaking of places with a bit of a controversial history, Trump's also been stirring the pot with his comments about the Panama Canal, right?
Oh, definitely. The Panama Canal is another place with a pretty tangled past
I can imagine.
when it comes to U.S. involvement.
Yeah.
The U.S. was a major player in building the canal in the early 1900s.
Right.
And controlled it for a big chunk of the 20th century. But then, in 1977, there was this treaty signed that eventually led to Panama taking full control in 1999.
Yeah. And that's what Trump's been pretty vocal about disagreeing with, right?
Oh, absolutely. He's called the agreement a disgrace. He insists the canal was built for our military,
Wow.
suggesting that the U.S. should still be in charge.
Right.
And he's been especially critical of Jimmy Carter, who was president when the treaty was signed.
It's funny because Trump's planning to attend Carter's funeral. Can you imagine that conversation?
It really shows the contrast between his past criticism and the current situation.
It is a bit ironic, yeah.
Yeah. But it also shows how strongly Trump feels about these issues. He sees the Panama Canal as a symbol of American strength, American ingenuity,
Yeah.
and he thinks giving it up was a huge mistake.
Okay, so we've got these big plans for expansion, but Trump's also been busy with ideas closer to home, right? What's the deal with this Gulf of America thing?
Oh, the Gulf of America. I mean, say what you will about it.
Yeah,
It has a certain ring to it.
I know it does.
It's a bold move,
Yeah.
symbolically. He's basically claiming the whole Gulf of Mexico as American territory,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah, and it's not just talk either. Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is already working on legislation
Oh, wow.
to make the name change official.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, so some politicians are really jumping on board with Trump's ideas.
Yeah, even the ones that seem pretty out there.
Yeah, like they're all in a competition to be the most Trumpian.
A little bit, yeah. And speaking of things that seem out there, we've got to talk about his attacks on, well, the Biden administration and pretty much anything else he's not happy with.
It's interesting how he manages to tie together all these seemingly random issues, going after the Biden administration's transition, criticizing environmental regulations. He weaves it all into this.
I know. Okay, let's unpack those attacks. What is he so fired up about with the Biden administration's transition? What's the big deal?
Well, he claims that Biden's team is, like, intentionally trying to make his life difficult
Yeah.
and block his agenda.
Okay.
And he points to Biden's recent executive order on offshore drilling as a prime example of this.
Yes. The never-ending battle over drilling.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a recurring theme.
It is, yeah, for sure.
And it really points to this bigger clash
Yeah.
between the two administrations over environmental policy.
Yeah.
Biden is pushing for more conservation and renewable energy,
Yeah.
and Trump is all about fossil fuels.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a real ideological battle.
It is, totally. And let's not forget about all the legal stuff. Trump's got his lawyers working overtime these days.
That's for sure. He's facing so many investigations and lawsuits,
Right.
and he's been very vocal about his criticism of special counsel Jack Smith
Oh, yeah?
and his praise for Judge Cannon, who recently ruled in his favor in one of the
That's-
cases. So, yeah, these legal issues are not going away anytime soon.
They're not. No, they're going to be a big factor moving forward. But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about some of his, let's say, more unique fixations.
Oh, yeah.
Like windmills, for instance.
Ah, yes, the windmills. Trump's campaign against wind energy is well documented, right?
Yeah.
He's called them ugly bird killers.
Right.
And most recently, he's blaming them for whale deaths.
Which, let's be real, is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But that's kind of his style, isn't it? He finds something he doesn't like
Yeah.
and blames it for all sorts of unrelated problems.
The pattern.
Yeah, and it's not just windmills either. He's been ranting about energy efficiency regulations.
Oh, yeah. The shower heads, dishwashers, electric heaters.
It's like he's got a vendetta against anything that saves water or energy.
Right. It's almost like he's stuck in the past.
Yeah, I know.
The longing for those days of inefficient appliances and, like, unlimited energy consumption.
Yeah.
But maybe there's more to these complaints than just, like, personal preference. Do you think there's a larger ideology or political strategy at play here?
You know what? That's a really good point. When you think about it, he's pushing back against government regulations,
Yeah.
championing these traditional industries, tapping into this nostalgia
Right.
for a simpler time. I mean, it all fits a certain worldview.
It does.
Okay, so maybe it's not just about windmills and shower heads, but like a whole way of looking at the world.
Right. And that's something to keep in mind as we, try to figure out what motivates Trump and what he
Yes.
might do next.
Totally. And you know what? Despite all the controversy and everything, he does seem to have a knack for getting those big money investments.
He does.
Like, remember that Emirati billionaire Hussein Sajwani
Oh, yeah.
and his huge data center project?
Oh, the Donald of Dubai?
Yes, exactly.
$20 billion? That's a lot of money.
It is. And of course, Trump's taking all the credit for it.
Well, Sajwani and Trump do have a history, going back to their business dealings in Dubai.
Oh, that's right.
And, Trump has been pushing for policies that are designed to attract foreign investment. So
Yeah.
it's possible his election had something to do with Sajwani's decision.
Yeah. It's hard to say for sure, but it's all part of that Trump mystique, I guess.
It is, that's for sure. And that mystique is what makes this whole thing so intriguing,
Yeah.
You've got these old ideas coming back to life, these big personalities clashing, and a whole lot of unpredictable behavior.
Yeah.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It is. It definitely keeps things interesting. Yeah, it does. It keeps us on our toes. And honestly, it makes you realize we're living in a time where things are changing so fast on a
Right.
global level, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Trump's vision, whether you agree with it or not, it really could be a turning point in how the U.S. deals with foreign policy, you know? What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. And it raises so many questions.
Totally.
Like, how would these expansionist plans actually work in the real world?
Yeah.
What would other countries think? What does it say about America's role in the world in this century?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, those are the big questions because even if these specific plans don't end up happening, the fact that these ideas are out there,
Exactly.
it changes the conversation, right?
Yeah, the conversation's shifted. And let's be honest, that conversation is probably going to get pretty heated, you know?
Yeah.
Especially if other countries see this as, like, a threat.
Oh, for sure. Just imagine the reaction from other countries if the U.S. actually made a serious move to take Greenland or the Panama Canal.
No.
I mean, it could damage alliances, lead to retaliation, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, think about Denmark and Panama. They're not
Right.
just going to stand by and watch the U.S. take their territory, right?
Yeah.
We could see anything from protests to economic sanctions, maybe even military buildups. It could get intense.
Yeah, and then there's the risk that things could get out of control, escalate into actual military conflict. It's a big gamble.
It's a huge gamble.
Yeah.
And it really reminds us that foreign policy isn't just about ideas and speeches, right? It has real consequences,
Yeah.
both the ones you intend and the ones you don't.
It does, totally. So we're thinking about the future of, U.S. expansionism, but we also can't forget about what all this means for politics here at home.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Trump's statements aren't just about foreign policy, they're also about domestic politics.
You hit the nail on the head, and that's what makes this even more complicated. He's playing to a specific audience, tapping into certain fears and desires, you know.
His stance on immigration is a perfect example. It's been such a core part of his, political identity from the very beginning.
Absolutely. And it definitely resonates with a lot of Americans. When he talks about tariffs against Mexico and Canada, calls for tougher border security, he's speaking to people who feel like they're being threatened by immigration.
Right.
People who believe America is being taken advantage of by its neighbors.
Yeah. And this Gulf of America idea seems to fit right into that narrative, too. It's all about projecting this image of American dominance.
Yeah, it's like drawing a line in the sand,
Yeah.
saying this is ours and we're not giving it up, you know?
Yeah, and a message like that is going to get mixed reactions, both in the U.S. and international.
Oh, absolutely. Some people are going to see it as a show of strength, while others will see it as nationalistic and provocative.
It's a stark reminder that America's really divided.
Yeah.
And those divisions are only going to deepen as we try to figure out how to deal with all these complicated geopolitical issues.
It's the reality we're facing. And, those divisions, they also show up in things like environmental policy.
Mhm.
Trump's attacks on wind energy, his rants about energy efficiency regulations. It's not just about personal preference. It's a clash of ideologies, right?
Right. Yeah.
About the role of government, future of energy.
Exactly. You've got some people who think the government should be more involved in regulating industry and promoting clean energy. And then you've got others who think that those regulations stifle economic growth and limit freedom. It's a debate that's been going on forever, and
Yeah.
it's not going away.
No, not anytime soon. And this is all happening while global tensions are rising, climate change is accelerating, the economy is uncertain, and we're dealing with so many other challenges.
Yeah, it's a lot to process. So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I think it's clear that what we're talking about is so much bigger than just a few news articles. It's
Yeah.
about America's place in the world, its politics, its values.
Absolutely. And those are the questions that aren't going away.
Right.
They're going to keep shaping the national conversation for years to come.
In a way, that's actually pretty exciting.
Yeah.
It means we're living in a time of huge change.
Yeah.
And there are so many possibilities. Whether those changes end up being good or bad, well, that's still to be seen.
It's a pivotal moment, that's for sure. It's a time when we need to pay attention, think critically,
Yes.
and be willing to have those tough conversations. The choices we make today are going to have a huge impact on the world we leave behind.
That's a good point. And, thinking about it, Trump's ideas about expanding U.S. territory, Greenland, the Panama Canal, even renaming the Gulf of Mexico, that's just one piece of this much bigger picture.
It is.
We're seeing these shifts in global power, new technologies popping up, the climate crisis. It's a lot to take in.
It's a complex world, but that complexity is also what makes it so interesting, don't you think? It's full of challenges, but it's also full of possibilities.
I completely agree. And that's what I love about these deep dives. They give us a chance to, step back from the headlines, really get into the nitty-gritty, and wrestle with those big questions.
That's what it's all about. It's a chance to understand the world better and have those important conversations about the things that matter.
Yeah, so as we move forward, it's up to each of us to stay informed, keep thinking critically, and be part of the conversation, right? The future isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
It's something we make together.
Well said. And I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive for now. We've covered a lot today,
We have.
from Greenland to the Panama Canal to the Gulf of America.
It's been a journey.
It has.
We've raised some important questions about where U.S. foreign policy is headed and what role America wants to play on the world stage.
And those questions are key to understanding not just Trump's vision, but the bigger trends that are shaping global politics today. And as you said, those trends have big implications for all of us, no matter where we live or what we believe politically.
Yeah, it's not just about foreign policy. These issues are all connected to domestic politics, economics, social movements, technology, everything.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness makes it so important to see the bigger picture, to understand how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's a great place to leave it for now.
I agree.
It's been fascinating talking about all this with you.
It's been a pleasure. And I always appreciate the opportunity to dive into these complex issues with such an engaged audience.
So to everyone listening, we hope you found this deep dive insightful and thought-provoking.
Yes.
And we encourage you to keep exploring these topics, asking those tough questions, and keep diving deep into what interests you. Until next time.
Keep those minds curious.
So we've been going deep on where U.S. foreign policy might be going and thinking about everything Trump has been saying. It really strikes me that he's not afraid to shake things up.
Oh, wait.
He questions alliances, pushes back against global norms.
Right?
And that really makes him a wild card.
Right. Totally. It's that unpredictability that makes him so interesting.
Yeah.
But also a little bit unnerving for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
It keeps everyone on edge, wondering what he'll do next.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings us to, I think, the big question. What could happen long term because of all this? Let's say, hypothetically, Trump actually pushes forward with this expansionist agenda. What do you think the global reaction would be?
Well, it's impossible to know for sure.
Yeah.
But I'd say there would be some serious pushback. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the countries that would be most affected, like Denmark with Greenland
Yeah.
or Panama with the canal.
Right.
They're not just going to sit back and watch.
No way.
We can see anything from diplomatic protests to economic sanctions, maybe even military buildups.
It could get messy.
Yeah, it could definitely escalate into a whole new set of, geopolitical tensions.
Oh, totally. And the world's already a pretty tense place. We've got rising nationalism, economic uncertainty, the climate crisis, all these things are making things feel unstable,
Right.
Adding in Trump's vision could really pour gasoline on the fire.
No doubt about it. It's a dangerous game. And it makes you wonder, are the benefits really worth the risk?
Yeah.
I mean, some people might say that a stronger, more assertive U.S. foreign policy is a good thing.
Right, to project power and get a strategic advantage.
Right, like control over important resources or shipping routes. But, as we said before, at what cost? Is it worth jeopardizing relationships, risking military conflicts, global instability, all for those potential gains?
Yeah, those are the tough questions.
They are.
There aren't any easy answers. It depends on what you prioritize.
Exactly.
The one thing's for sure, we can't just ignore this stuff. Pretend it's not happening.
No, we have to engage with it.
Yeah, and that's what I think makes these deep dives so important. They let us step back from the headlines, dig into the details, and really think about these big questions.
It's a chance to broaden our understanding and have those critical conversations.
So as we wrap things up here, I think the big takeaway is that Trump's vision is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Right.
There are these global power shifts happening, new technologies, the climate crisis. It's a lot.
It is. But it's also incredibly fascinating. As we move forward, it's up to all of us to stay informed, think critically, and be part of shaping the future. Because the future isn't something that just happens to us, it's something we create.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And on that note, I think we'll wrap up this deep dive. It's been a journey.
It has.
Greenland, Panama Canal, Gulf of America, we've covered a lot.
We have.
Hopefully it's giving you some new insights, things to think about.
Some food for thought.
And to everyone listening, keep those minds curious. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into what interests you. Until next time.